Hello everyone. This will be phase 5 of my What If Marvel Kept All of Their Character Rights. So, without further delay, let's begin. Kicking off this phase will be Fantastic Four Battle in the Deep. The movie kicks off with a ship sailing throughout the Atlantic Ocean. In this ship, we would see various amounts of advanced technology, and one of the crew members would confront their captain. "We've been searching for hours. Don't you think it's time to call it quits?" The captain would look at this crew member and respond with, "Come on, where's your sense of adventure? We barely even started." And that is until a scanner picks up a strange phenomenon going on, and the captain would look at it and would state, "I feel like we're getting closer. I can just feel it." The ship would suddenly start to crack and vibrate. All of the other crew members would be a bit startled, but the captain would gather his bearings. "Don't worry, men, it's just the water pressure." The ship would start to vibrate and shake once again, and the captain would now grow even more startled, as these were calm waters, so it doesn't make sense for the ship to be swaying like this. That is until all of a sudden, blue people would begin to climb up the ship and confront the crew members. Each and every one of the crew members would be shocked and scared, and the blue people would proceed to attack, killing everyone on board. After the deed is done, all of the blue people would stand in formation as if they're waiting for someone, and as if on cue, we would see a man with wings on his ankles fly up and descend down on the ship. We would see him slowly walking, and the face would reveal to be Namor the Submariner. And we would see him scouring the ship, looking for any signs of the advanced technology. He would then stop, and it would appear that something has caught his eye, and he would slowly trace his hand upon one of the machines used by the shipmen, in which he would trace his hands upon a logo which reads Baxter Technologies. We would cut to New York City, where we would see Reed Richards on The Tonight Show discussing recent events, as well as trying to mitigate any destruction or damages that have been caused by the Skrull invasion. After the conference finishes, Reed is confronted by his wife, Sue Storm, and both of them would share a kiss before walking off out of the building. Reed would state how this is the 5th meeting he's had this week, and it's only Tuesday, and he says how the Skrull invasion really put a number on the city, and now that the people need reassurance that an event like this won't happen again. The couple would go outside, where they would see their car, as well as Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm seemingly having another argument. The 4 of them would each enter the car and return back to the Baxter building, where they would be confronted by a seemingly mysterious and suspicious person waiting outside of their building. Reed Richards would be curious and confront this mysterious figure, and the figure would reveal herself to be Namor, but she appears to be in a human disguise. Reed Richards would be confused on why she is confronting him until Namor would explain that they has found his technology on their side of the ocean, and he encourages them to not have any suspicious activities going on, as their king is very superstitious. Reed Richards would wonder to himself, did she just come all this way to tell me that? Or is this a warning? Reed Richards would explain how he has no knowledge of this, in which Namor would start to get annoyed and would further reinstate her claim. Just keep your technology out of our oceans, or else you'll want to know the consequences. Namor would then walk away, seemingly blending in with the crowd. Sue Storm would approach Reed, asking who was that. Reed would tell her everything, in which Sue would be confused and a bit skeptical. But undeterred, the Fantastic Four would return back to the Baxter building, where they are greeted by their robot assistant, Herbie. The Human Torch and the Thing would go on about their own ways, and Sue would return back to her room. But Reed would be intrigued by that encounter with the mysterious woman and would further look into it to find if he can see any more details on the matter. And it takes him a while, but he would ultimately discover a mythological place called Atlantis on his computers. Reed Richards would be skeptical as he believed that this city was just a myth, but the way that the woman said to keep his technology out of the waters further increases his curiosity. And so, with a bit more digging, he finds that there has been active reports dating back to the 18th century about mysterious people coming out of the waters and killing unsuspecting sailormen. Reed would be even more intrigued as he always believed that this place was a myth, but due to this recent discovery, he decides to send a drone out to scout around to see if he can find any more information, as Reed is a scientist first and a common thinker second. The scene would then shift into the city known as Atlantis, where we would see Namor the Submariner sitting on his throne. That is until one of his subjects would approach him and informing him that there has been another sighting of a mysterious source of technology coming through our waters, and it appears to be of the same design as it was the one the previous nights ago from Baxter Technologies. This would enrage Namor as he's already giving a warning to these surface dwellers, so it appears now that he has to confront them by himself and enforce his policy personally. A couple days would pass and there would still be no sign of the drone, and Reed would start to get worried as it appears that the drone might have been destroyed. That is until, as if on cue, the building would shake and him and the rest of the Fantastic Four would go outside to see what is causing it. And what caught their eye is something that none of them would have believed if you had told them. They would see a man with wings on his ankles hovering above them, which he would slowly descend and confront Reed Richards, and he would tell him that he has already given a warning for him to stay out of his waters, and since he has ignored that warning, he decides to take matters into his own hands, and then all of a sudden, Namor would punch Reed in the middle of his face, sending him flying back into the building. This would cause all of the other members of the Fantastic Four to activate their powers and attack Namor. Namor would pull up a brilliant resistance as he has strength comparable to that of the Hulk. The Thing would throw a punch at Namor, which Namor would easily catch. He then proceeds to kick the Thing in the legs, trying to get him down on one knee, before kicking him away, sending him turtling through the opposite direction. The Human Torch would be up next, and what follows through is an elemental battle between water and fire. It is a spectacle to see as we would see bystanders running away from the chaos. The Human Torch gives Namor a run for his money, but unfortunately due to Namor's many years of experience, he has dealt with fire users in the past, and thus he knows how to deal with them. And so with a quick succession of combos, Namor manages to outperform the Human Torch and knock him down to the ground. The Invisible Woman would try to entrap Namor with her invisible bubbles, trying to suffocate him, but Namor would look at this and be almost entranced by the Invisible Woman, remarking how he didn't know that surface dwellers could be so beautiful. Invisible Woman's face would betray no reaction as she would increase the intensity of her bubble until Namor would clasp his hands and proceed to burst out the bubble with his bare fist before dashing towards the Invisible Woman and grabbing her by the neck. But Reed would ultimately come to and proceed to trap Namor using his elastic body. Namor would easily break through of this, grabbing Reed by the face and stripping him off of him. The Thing would come barreling down from above and try to crush Namor, but Namor would dodge quickly, jumping out of the way, and would proceed to dash back at the Thing, punching him through the concrete, and would proceed to dash towards him once more before kicking him in the side of a building. All of this chaos would attract the attention of the police, and we would see multiple cop cars surrounding the area. Namor, seeing as how he didn't want to draw this much attention, would proceed to look at the Invisible Woman, who is still dazed from his attack. Namor decides to think on his feet and would proceed to take the Invisible Woman as a hostage before returning back into his domain, jumping off and flying using his ankle wings. The Human Torch would try to chase after them, but due to the beating he received from Namor, he is weak and doesn't have the strength to go flying for that long. After the encounter, we would see the Fantastic Four back at the Massacre building, licking their wounds, and we would see Reed Richards furious at himself as he knows that he was just given a warning, but he decides to operate anyway. Johnny Storm is still injured, and the Thing is a little bit flustered and embarrassed that he got folded like that. He would insist that he asks the Avengers for help, but Reed, being the prideful man that he is, denies that and says that this is a matter that they must deal with on their own. He mentions that he still has the location tracked down on his last drone, and maybe they could use that information to track down Namor's whereabouts and bring Sue back. In the underwater city of Atlantis, we would see Sue Storm trapped in a dungeon. We would see Namor slowly approach her cell, and we would see them start to converse a little bit. Sue Storm remarking that he doesn't have to pretend like he's the good guy here, as he knows that her team would be here at any moment and break her free. And in this scene, we would see Namor start to flirt with Sue a little bit as he would explain who he is as well as the origins of his city. And this scene would mimic that scene with Namor and Shuri, but it would be a bit more flirtatious at the tone, since as Namor would agree to let Sue Storm out of her cell as a way to show her his city and to have her see the reason why he must keep it a secret, as he believes that mankind is a force of destruction. And this scene would pretty much more or less be the same as when Namor was showing Shuri around Talakan, I think that was called. Oh, so stupid. I don't know why they couldn't just call it Atlantis. But this scene would basically mimic that. And at the end of the scene, we would see Namor start to intertwine his hands with Sue's. Sue would pull away, but Namor would grab her hands back and would proceed to face her, cupping her cheek. Sue would then back away, stating that she's married. But Namor would insist, saying how she could stay here forever and she won't have to worry about any of her mortal troubles ever again. We would then see Namor brush Sue's hair back as Invisible Woman would start twiddling with her fingers. Back at the Fantastic Four's base of operations, we would see them start to get ready to travel to Atlantis as they would head off using an aircraft, as well as it would shapeshift into a submarine if need be. They need to get into the water, in which they do, and it would take them a while, but as if it wasn't for Reed's technology, they would have never found it. But eventually they do, where they would be confronted by Namor's guards, and they would surround the ship. The Fantastic Four, using advanced scuba diving gear, would proceed to blast out of the ship and would engage in a battle with each of Namor's soldiers. We would see the Human Torch having a tougher time though, as he is submerged in water and his firepower isn't nearly as effective as it is on land, if it even works down here at all. But the combined efforts of the Thing and as well as Reed Richards are able to subdue most of Namor's guards, and this would cause Namor himself to enter the battlefield, in which he would confront the three and he would state their business. Reed would look at Namor with disdain and would say that their business is to get his wife back. Namor would look down at Reed almost with disgust, before Sue would then appear right beside Namor. Reed would be confused on why Sue isn't in a cell. Sue would explain to the team that Namor was just showing her around the city and would state that he would leave them alone if Reed was invading on his city. Reed would agree to these terms, but that would be until Namor would speak up, demanding that Reed Richards fight him in a duel, and the winner would proceed to gain the hands of Sue Storm. Reed would look at Namor with anger, saying as how Sue isn't just some prize to be won, but Namor would further reinstate his claim, as it was either that or none of them are leaving. As Namor says this, his guards would proceed to point their weapons at the Fantastic Four, reinforcing his claim. And so, with no other option, Reed Richards would agree to this duel, and Namor would state the ground rules, and he would tell Mr. Fantastic to follow him to the stadium. Human Torch would be surprised. Wait, you guys are fighting now? Namor would look at the Human Torch as if the answer wasn't already obvious, before he proceeds to mock Reed Richards. Oh, what? Is now not the best time for you? Don't worry, I've got all day. This would annoy Reed Richards more than you'd expect, and he would agree to follow Namor. And so, the Fantastic Four, Namor, and as well as Namor's guards would make their way to the stadium, where in each corner we would see Namor readying his trident, as well as Reed Richards preparing himself for the battle. In his corner, we would see both Johnny Storm and the Thing trying to hype him up, and we would see Sue also in his corner. And so, one of Namor's guards would proceed to start the battle, and both Namor and Reed Richards would charge at each other. Reed Richards would try to enlarge his fist and try and catch Namor, but Namor would dodge and would proceed to uppercut Reed in the chin, sending him flying back. Namor would then charge at Reed, trying to stab him with his trident, but Reed, due to his elastic body, would dodge with ease and would proceed to wrap himself around Namor, debilitating his movements. Namor would try to break free, but Reed Richards would hold steady. That is until Namor would proceed to do the same action as he did before, where he would grab Reed's face and strip him off him. Reed would go flying, and Namor would double down on this encounter, crashing his fist onto Reed's gut before sending him down to the ocean floor with a double axe hammer to the head. Namor would descend down to Reed's level and would proceed to stomp on his head with the heel of his shoe, and would proceed to mock him by rubbing his foot on the back of Reed's head. And Namor would prepare his trident, intent on dealing a finishing blow. That is until Reed would wrap his elastic arms around Namor's arms, stopping the trident mid-strike. He would then proceed to wiggle out of Namor's foot and would proceed to use his head to dash towards Namor's head, crashing onto him, and this would stumble Namor back before Reed would follow onto this onslaught, using his hands to bash towards Namor, hitting him with a succession of combos, and this would proceed to stumble Namor back as well, as he is overwhelmed by all of these punches. And so Reed would proceed to wrap his arms around Namor's arms once more, before he would lean his head back as far as he can, before using his momentum to crash towards Namor's forehead, sending an audible crash that is heard throughout the stadium. This would cause both Reed Richards and Namor's foreheads to bleed. But Reed would use this opportunity to grab Namor's trident, forcing it out of his grasp, and hold Namor at the tip of his trident towards his neck. The match would then be called, with Reed Richards as the winner. Namor would be enraged and would almost not allow Reed to leave, but then he remembers his deal, and reluctantly he allows each of the members of the Fantastic Four to leave his city, but with the promise that they would never return or invade on his privacy ever again. But then he would have one last look at Sue before the Fantastic Four would then depart the city of Atlantis and return back to the Baxter Building after a couple of hours. And the Fantastic Four would return to their usual activities. But Sue would pull Reed Richards to the side and would tell him some incoming news that could be the worst or the best thing to happen to Reed Richards. Sue Storm is pregnant. The next movie will be The Marvels, and this will essentially be a better version of the original movie, where we would see Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, as well as Spectrum joining forces to save the universe. And I'd have the plot be much more cohesive and consistent, as well as making Captain Marvel more of an interesting character. Coming up after The Marvels will be Ghost Rider. And I'd have this movie be rated M, as well as having Johnny Blaze as the main Ghost Rider of the MCU. The main villain I'm thinking of for this movie is Mephisto, and I'd have Robbie Reyes, Ghost Rider from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., make an appearance in this movie as well. As for the actor, I don't really mind who plays Johnny Blaze, as long as he has that variety, that level of emotion and aura of death that surrounds Ghost Rider. The plot of this movie will essentially be Ghost Rider trying to escape the shadow of Mephisto. And we would see him being tested by Mephisto, where we would fight demons and Mephisto's forces. And throughout the movie, we would also see Robbie Reyes assisting Johnny Blaze in this conquest. And so at the end of the movie, we would see both Johnny Blaze and Robbie Reyes standing side by side, confronting Mephisto, and which would result in an ultimate battle. And this battle would require a lot of CGI and practical effects, but I think that it could be good. And this battle would showcase really the mystical side of the MCU as well as the magical side as well, just to show how OP the characters can be, akin to the comic. And it will be just enough to show the audience that these are the heavy hitters of the universe. And so both of the Ghost Riders won't defeat Mephisto, of course, but just subdue him to stay out of their business. We would get a post-credit scene teasing another Ghost Rider villain, Blackheart. The next movie will be Thor, the God Butcher. And as you might have guessed, the main villain I'd have for this movie will be Gorr. And he would be portrayed much better than he was in Taika Waititi's movie. So Gorr would be a much more prominent threat and he'll be taken more seriously. And in order to ensure that, I'd have more scenes devoted to Gorr and his conquest of killing each god. So we would see him going on basically a murder spree, where we would see him killing each god in each different pantheon. Also, it will be established that Gorr is in hold of the Necro Sword, which is basically a symbiote and is connected to Null, the god of symbiotes, which is a character that I have plans for later on in the MCU. And so all of this killing would then attract the attention of Thor, who with the help of Beta Ray Bill would search for this God Butcher and put a stop to his crimes. And he would also leave Loki in charge of New Asgard while he's away, which is an idea that Loki definitely does not mind. And so this movie would pretty much be more of a crime/thriller movie more than a superhero one, where it will basically be both Thor and Beta Ray Bill trying to uncover the mystery of the God Butcher and going to each of his sites where we would see a bloodbath of murder and death. Thor would be shocked and appalled that someone could have the power to do this, as well as the audacity. Beta Ray Bill would be shocked as well, saying, what crimes could the gods have committed to invoke such ferocity? Throughout their journey, they would also come across another Asgardian, Valkyrie, who I'll have be played by a different actor this time just for comic accuracy. But her story would more or less be in line with her original origin in the MCU, where her sisters were slain, but not by Hela, but instead by the God Butcher. And so she agrees to help Thor and Beta Ray Bill on their quest. And so, with the combined efforts of Thor, Valkyrie, and Beta Ray Bill, each of them manage to confront the God Butcher, which enacts an ultimate battle between the colliding forces. But Gorr would prove to be more of a match than the three allies, in which he would proceed to overpower them using the power of the Necro Sword and leave them for dead. But miraculously, each of them managed to survive thanks to Beta Ray Bill's quick thinking in managing to get away from Gorr's wrath. Now back at New Asgard, each of them are bruised and beaten, trying to figure out a strategy as a way to defeat the God Butcher. It is here where they decide that they must visit the Greek pantheon in order to seek help. And so Thor, Beta Ray Bill, and Valkyrie would arrive at Mount Olympus, where they would be confronted by Zeus. And Thor would try to ask Zeus for his help, but Zeus would not take the threat seriously as he believes that Gorr is not a match for him. Zeus is also furious as to why this other pantheon is entering in his domain. That is until we would hear a large crash and one of the pillars at Mount Olympus would fall, creating a large shatter throughout the mountain. Up above, we would see Gorr the God Butcher in the distance, smiling with sadistic glee as he uses his powers to dash forth to the gods and proceeds to engage in a battle with each of the 12 Olympian gods. He takes out Artemis and Apollo easily, as well as managing to subdue both Poseidon and Demeter. He deals with all the other gods, but surprisingly, Ares is not amongst them, as he appears to be off somewhere else. Thor, as well as Beta Ray Bill and Valkyrie, would try to assist, but they would still prove to be no match as Gorr would be too powerful. Thor would look at Zeus, intending on dealing a finishing blow. That is until he is tackled by Thor and thrown into another space of the mountain. Gorr would then backhand the God of Thunder, sending him flying, and this is where he would reveal his plan of using the goddess Eternity to grant him one wish, his only wish. Every god dead at his feet. And so, he would dash towards the air and make his exit. Thor, Beta Ray Bill, and Valkyrie know what their next move should be, and they should go after Gorr and stop him. And Thor would try one last time to enlist the help of Zeus, but Zeus would angrily cast him away, seeing Thor as the reason as to why Gorr attacked Mount Olympus in the first place, seeing as if that Gorr has followed Thor and his party here, leading to the destruction of his home. We would then see Zeus vow vengeance upon the god of thunder, saying how he will stalk him for all of his miserable days. Beta Ray Bill would be insulted and would try to attack Zeus, but Thor would hold him back, telling him that it isn't worth it and that they need to go stop Gorr now. And so the trio, all on their own, would head to Gorr's location, where they would proceed to have one final battle. At the place of eternity, we will see the trio have a valiant effort in trying to stop Gorr, but they are still no match, as the goddess herself appears and Gorr would proceed to make his wish. That is, until he is tackled by Beta Ray Bill, which allows enough of a distraction for Thor to make his wish to the eternal goddess, to stop Gorr and his madness. This wish would be granted, and we would slowly see the god butcher chip away until he is reduced to nothing. The movie would end with the trio arriving back at New Asgard, where we would see a reluctant Loki seemingly does not want to give up the throne until he is forced to by Thor. And we would also see Valkyrie making her new home in New Asgard, seeing as how she might not be so lonely after all. We would get a post-credit scene of Zeus still at his throne, the day's events still fresh on his mind, which makes him angry and angrier every time he thinks about it. And it appears as though he is talking to someone, and only one sentence would exit his mouth. Thor, Odin's son, must die. Bring me his head. And the camera would shift into the figure of Hercules. We would see him kneel down and nod at his father in obedience, knowing what his next mission will be. The project following will be Daredevil Season 4. And this will essentially be a continuation of the Netflix Daredevil series. So it would basically be the Season 4 that we never got. And I'd have this take some elements of Daredevil Born Again, where we would see Muse as the main villain of the season. I would also have Bullseye as another main villain and Kingpin return to power. Have the Punisher be featured in this season as well, as sort of an ally to Daredevil, but he mainly does his own thing. The movie following this will be Nova. The movie starts in Xandar, and the screen would shift into that of the Nova Corps headquarters. We would see certain experiments being tested using that of the Power Stone, and which the way I would go about it is it would be similar to how Earth was experimenting with the Space Stone, as I believe if humans can make something out of an Infinity Stone, then I figured why not any other planet. And so these tests would be similar to that of the Super Soldier test, but way more powerful, and would turn normal Nova soldiers into elite one-man armies, inheriting the powers of the Power Stone. And so the forces would be chucked full of these guys until one day they're attacked by a mysterious force, which would reveal itself to be the forces of Thanos' army. And this will essentially be the scene of Thanos invading Xandar in order to get the Power Stone that we knew was off-screen during the events of Infinity War. And so the Nova Force would try a valiant effort, but there are no match for the forces of Thanos. But miraculously, one of the troops managed to survive and are sent off the planet in search for help. Thanos notices this and sends off a fleet of his own to chase the spaceship. Inside the spaceship, it would reveal to be the same person who at first mocked Peter Quill, but gained his respect, and now he is injured and is being chased by a fleet of Thanos' army. And so the chase goes on for a while until all of the ships encounter an asteroid field, in which the skilled is managed to make his way through without any effort. But Thanos' fleet has more trouble, as one by one, each of the ships get hit by a stray asteroid. But we see one of the ships still maintaining course until it is ultimately hit by an asteroid as well. And so, thinking that he is safe, the remaining Nova Corps agent would proceed to head off into his destination. But slowly, we would see one of the other ships from Thanos' fleet managing to survive the asteroid onslaught and is currently en route chasing the ship that is housing the Nova agent. On Earth, we would see a young man, about 21 to 22, and he is seen on his dirt bike, riding through a mountainous terrain. That is until he peers up at the sky and noticing a wreckage flying towards from the atmosphere and landing just a couple of yards away from him. Curious, the boy would proceed to use his dirt bike and travel towards the destination, in which he would encounter a crashed spaceship with what appears to be an alien inside. He slowly gets close to the spacecraft as he sees the Nova Corps agent injured and barely clinging on to life. Quickly, the Nova agent acts in haste and informs the boy that he has no time left and that he must harness his energy and avenge the Nova Corps. The boy is confused and doesn't even know what the hell he means and thinks that he is some drunk. But then again, he did just fall from the sky, so he doesn't think that's very likely. The Nova agent continues, seeing as he feels as if he's been followed, and urges the young man to act in haste and absorb his energy in order to harness the powers of Nova. The young man is still confused and stumbles upon his words. That is until the Nova agent would grab his hands and makes him swear that he'll avenge the Nova Corps and save the galaxy from the clutches of Thanos. The young man would look at the Nova agent for a second, but would hastily agree, seeing as how he doesn't have any other option. The Nova agent would ask the young man, what's his name? Richard. Richard Ryder. Richard Ryder, I hand to you the abilities and powers of Nova. And so a blinding light would ensue, casting an enlightening field that could be seen for miles. And so the light would dissipate and we would see Richard Ryder fully enclosed in Nova armor. He would proceed to look at himself, not really sure what to make of it. That is until he senses a weird presence and would start towards the sky, where he would see another spaceship crash land. And he is curious, thinking that this is another Nova agent. That is until the spaceship would crash open, revealing itself to be a mysterious alien-looking figure who introduces himself as Diamond Head. And for those of you who don't know, Diamond Head is basically an old Nova villain. And so it appears that his original target has already died on the way here. So seeing as this new Nova is in his field of sight, he figures that he'll just have to kill him in order to please Thanos. Richard Ryder stumbles back and is confused on why this guy all of a sudden wants to kill him. And Diamond Head would not hesitate to dash towards the new Nova, smashing his fist towards his face, and which would result in an ultimate battle with an inexperienced Nova fighting the furious Diamond Head. The battle is intense, as Diamond Head would seemingly get the upper hand, and Nova would be overwhelmed as not knowing really how to fight, and is then knocked out by Diamond Head and dragged off into a ship, heading back towards the location of Thanos' fleet. And so this movie will essentially be the plot of a young Richard Ryder Nova learning his powers and trying to get a hold of it, while also facing this new threat in Diamond Head. And slowly throughout the film, we would see him start getting more used to his powers until he is ultimately competent enough to defeat the forces of Diamond Head and head back to Xandar, in which she is shocked to see the ruined planet destroyed by Thanos' fleet. He curses at himself, seeing as how he was too late and he never managed to fulfill the Nova agent's request, his dying wish. We would see Richard Ryder wallowing in his self-grief. That is until he looks up to see a spaceship and he enters in a battle scene prepared to defend himself. That is until a familiar man steps out and accompanied by his team. What really weirds Nova out is what appears to be a talking raccoon and tree walking alongside the man. Who the hell are you, dude? And so the screen would cut to black. The next movie will be The Amazing Spider-Man 5. The movie would start with a chase scene where we would see a man who seems as if he's running away from the cops, which he is, as we will see multiple police cars heading towards his direction, and we would see him start to stumble as he would make his way in the outskirts of New York City, where he would stumble across a lot of rocks and dirt, causing him to trip and drop his wallet. In his wallet, we would see his stuff fly out and land on the ground. We would see a peculiar ID with the name of Flint Marco. And he would have no time to pick up his wallet as the police were on his trail, so he would quickly run towards the nearest site he could find, which unfortunately for him would be an experimental site where they are testing out a new machine. Clumsily, this man would fall into that experiment, and unknown to the scientists, they activate the machine, which causes a reaction in which would leave the man for dead, supposedly. But hours later, we would see a figure start to rise from the sands, and out would step towards the man who is covered in sand before he looks at a framed picture of what seems to be his daughter, and he regains consciousness just enough for him to morph back into his human form as he would slowly stumble out of the machine. Later on, we would see him make his way back to New York City, where it would appear as if he's trying to enter an apartment building. So he would climb in the fire escape and enter through a window, where he would enter a kitchen. He is walking through an apartment before he stops in front of a door. Slowly, he would creak it open to find a little girl laying there. This would be revealed as Sandman's daughter, who is terminally ill and is the reason why he is in the life of crime in the first place, as to trying to get enough money to find a treatment for his daughter. Flint would look longingly at his daughter, not wanting to wake her up. That is until a voice would be heard from behind him, and it would reveal Flint's ex-wife and his daughter's mother. "You need to leave now. I just wanted to see my daughter." "You're a wanted criminal, William. We don't need that type of baggage in our lives. So either you leave now or I dial the police." Flint would look at his daughter one last time before making an exit, still not wanting to wake her up. Before he exits back out the window, he turns to his ex-wife. "I'm not a bad guy. I'm just someone with bad luck." And he would make his leave before his ex-wife could call the cops, and he would stumble across the street, unsure of what to do next, but reminding himself of his daughter and why he's doing what he's doing in the first place. His mind is set, as with these new abilities, he might have an easier way of making money. The screen would shift into the daytime, where we would find Peter Parker entering the Daily Bugle building, where we would find J. Jonah Jameson up to his usual antics. So J. Jonah would call in both Peter and Eddie Brock into his office, seeing as how they are his best photographers, and he has an assignment for them. And if one of them succeeds, he'll have a promotion ready. Both Peter and Eddie are ecstatic as they need the money. The challenge would be to catch Spider-Man in the act, meaning to catch Spider-Man doing criminal activities, and as a way to slanderize him and paint him as a criminal. Peter would roll his eyes, seeing as how that would never be possible, but Eddie would accept the challenge, and he would look at Peter. "Sorry, pal, but count your days. That promotion is mine. You'll never get that shot, dude." "Yeah, we'll see about that." Peter would then leave work and enter inside of a strangely luxurious apartment building, and it would be revealed that it is both him and MJ's apartment that they share together. Well, mostly MJ, as she is the one paying the rent with her supermodel career doing numbers. Peter was at first uncomfortable with having MJ take care of the expenses, but Mary Jane would say that it's no big deal. Both Peter and Mary Jane would embrace and share a kiss, and Peter would explain the assignment that JJJ had for him. Mary Jane would laugh it off, seeing as how that shot couldn't be possible. And throughout this discussion, it would be revealed that Peter is nearing the end of his college life, and he is set to graduate soon. And so currently he is in the option of taking a job at either Stark Industries, Baxter Enterprises, or Horizon Labs as a means to earn more income. But midway while Peter is saying this, there is a breaking news update of a bank robbery being taking place on a truck. Peter would sigh as his black suit would wrap around him almost automatically as he would kiss MJ one last goodbye and swing out of the window towards the crime scene. We would see the truck being bombarded by what appears to be sand as the drivers have no idea what's going on. And inside of the truck, we would see the Sandman collecting as much money as he can and stuffing it in a bag. But then we would see Spider-Man whip through the air as he would land on top of the truck and break through using his strength, entering inside and confronting the Sandman. Spider-Man's surprise would be immeasurable. John Cena? No, I'm kidding. He doesn't say that, but holy shit, imagine. Spider-Man would say, "Look, I don't know who you think you are, pal, but I don't think this money belongs to you, so I'm gonna need you to put everything back." The Sandman would look at him. "Look, I know who you are, and I don't want to hurt you, but you need to stay out of my way." Spider-Man would remark, "You must not have heard. I'm the sheriff around these parts," in which Sandman would try to swing at him. Spider-Man would dodge and would punch him in the stomach. But surprisingly, Spider-Man's hand would go through his torso, exiting out of the other side, and his hand would be entrapped in what appears to be sand. The Spider-Man would be confused, and Sandman would enlarge his hands into a large sand fist and punch him through the truck, sending him flying throughout the street. And this battle would pretty much be similar to that of the Spider-Man and Sandman first battle in Spider-Man 3. Except, while Spider-Man and Sandman are fighting, a mysterious green mist would surround the truck, and Spider-Man and Sandman would stop fighting and look around confused. "Is this you? I thought this was you." And all of a sudden, a mysterious man would appear out of thin air, stopping the truck. And his attire would be questionable at most, seeing as how he has a fishbowl on his head. "Rejoice, New York citizens. Mysterio is here to save the day." This event would cause enough of a distraction for the Sandman to slip away using his dust cloud to get out of the battle scene. And Spider-Man would try to track him down, but it would be pointless as he would look back at Mysterio to see him being surrounded by curious onlookers. Yes, I take autographs, people." Spider-Man would be confused, but seeing as how this new Mysterio guy isn't really posing as a threat, he would then later swing away, remarking to himself, "Where the hell do these guys come from?" The next day, we see Peter heading back to the Daily Bugle, where we would see new newspapers of Mysterio being flashed around as J. Jonah Jameson would be standing in his office with a big grin on his face. Peter would be confused on what's going on before Eddie would tell him that this new Mysterio guy is a new sensation nowadays, and how people are blaming Spider-Man for the amount of damages that the truck has caused and painting Mysterio as the good guy. So, what was that about me not getting that photo? Looks like your guy Spider-Man is finally showing his true colors, and it's only a matter of time before I can catch that perfect moment. Eddie would smirk at Peter before heading off his own way. This would annoy Peter, as even though Spider-Man slander wasn't anything new to him, this particular incident was really starting to get under his skin, as we would see the effects of the symbiote start to take over his psyche a bit. We would then cut to nighttime, where we would see Spider-Man on his usual patrol, still pretty upset about today's events. But that would be until a mysterious figure catches his eye, and it looks to be familiar too, as he would appear to follow this figure, and when he would catch up, it would reveal to be none other than Black Cat. Spider-Man would be confused and would ask Black Cat what she's up to. She would respond that she was just in the neighborhood and thought that she might need a little fun. She gets closer to Spider-Man as she says this. "I like the new suit, by the way. You copying me now?" Spider-Man would back away, which would cause Black Cat to pout, before she would say that she was investigating a crime king known as Tombstone, who was trying to rise up to power after the fall of Kingpin. Spider-Man would be intrigued, and Black Cat would say that he was just heading to his location now, and she might need his help to take him down, as she didn't want another kingpin trying to rule the streets. Spider-Man would agree, and he would follow Black Cat to Tombstone's location, where they would eventually make it, and would ultimately have a battle with Tombstone's men, as his men would try to defeat the two, but the two are in perfect sync as they manage to defeat his men with ease, and they encounter Tombstone, angered by their intrusion, and would proceed to attack them. Spider-Man would have a little bit of trouble, and Black Cat would still be defeating Tombstone's men. But Spider-Man all of a sudden would start to snap, and he would proceed to fight more viciously than he usually would. And thus, with his no vicious onslaught, he would overpower Tombstone and would proceed to beat him within an inch of his life. Black Cat would be surprised by the brutality, and Spider-Man would reel back his fist, attempting to deal a finishing blow. That is, until he stops himself midway through and would be surprised at his own actions. He would turn back towards Black Cat and would dip out the window with a bloody Tombstone in his wake. Spider-Man would be confused and would zip through the New York skyline. He would be surprised at his own brutality and would question, was that really him in control of his actions? Peter decides to just sleep it off, and so the next day would come, and we would see him start to make his way towards the Daily Bugle, where we would catch a newspaper in his field of vision, and in the newspaper, it would reveal a story about Spider-Man going mad and robbing a bank. Peter would be confused until he would look at who published the photo, Eddie Brock. This would enact a rage in Peter as he was storming the Daily Bugle building, attempting to confront Eddie. Peter would look around until he would spot Eddie being celebrated by the other Daily Bugle staff, and he would walk towards Eddie. Eddie would see him and would proceed to give a smirk at his way. So, what was that about me not getting that photo? Peter would slam Eddie against the wall with force, shocking Eddie as he always assumed that Peter was a scrawny kid. Eddie would try to shake Peter off, but it would be no use. It was as if Peter's grip was made out of iron, and so Peter would look at Eddie. "You're trash, Brock. Your photos are fake." Eddie would laugh, pretending not to know what Peter was talking about, but Peter wouldn't buy it. And so, Eddie would then lean down, whispering in Peter's ear to make sure no one else could hear. "Look, you're right. Those photos are fake. But please, me and my wife were struggling. I needed that promotion. I needed that money. Please." Peter would look at Eddie with a hint of disgust. "You should have thought of that earlier, chump." Peter would let go of Eddie and would stomp out of the Daily Bugle, but not before slamming a bunch of papers in J. Jonah Jameson's chest, telling him, "Tell your editor to check his sources next time." And with that, Peter leaves, and J. Jonah would check the papers that Peter gave him, and he would look at them in shock before looking at Eddie with disgust. We would cut to the Sandman in a warehouse counting the money that he earns from that robbery, but all of a sudden, a green mist would surround him, and he would look as if it was familiar, which it was, and Mysterio would appear in front of him. The Sandman would put his guard up, thinking that Mysterio is here to take him to jail. But Mysterio would clarify that he has no interest in any of that, and he's just posing as a hero to get the public's attention. And I know what the Sandman really wants. You want to earn enough money for your family. Sandman would be confused on what Mysterio's end goal here is, and Mysterio would just say that in order for him to truly be the hero of the city, he has to get rid of Spider-Man. And so he proposes that they have a little team up, something that'll meet both of their goals. Sandman would look at Mysterio with a bit of apprehension before reluctantly agreeing, seeing as how Spider-Man is always getting in the way of his plans and trying to get enough money. We cut to the Sandman wreaking havoc in a nearby street where he is trying to gain the attention of Spider-Man, which he would, with Spider-Man draped in his all-black symbiote suit. But this time, it looks a bit more rough around the edges, as if the suit is somehow angrier. And Spider-Man would be furious that Sandman is pulling the same stunt again. He would aim towards trying to enact an ultimate battle. That is, until green mist would surround him once again, and Mysterio would appear, casting Spider-Man in an illusion, similar to that sequence in Far From Home. And Peter would be so sick and fed up of these guys, and this would cause him to snap, and he would proceed to break out of the illusion. He would beat Mysterio within an inch of his life. Sandman would be surprised by the brutality, and Peter would figure out a way to defeat the Sandman using water. And so, both the Sandman and Mysterio are beaten, but Spider-Man is still angry, and he lashes out at the crowd. The crowd would be terrified and would be seen to run away from the hero. And this is where we would see Spider-Man start to reflect on his actions before swinging away, trying to get away from the civilians before he could harm them. Meanwhile, we would see Eddie Brock entering a church in which we would see him sitting down, and it would appear as if he was praying. I come to you today. My wife has left me. I was fired from my job, and I recently got a visit from the hospital, and it turns out that I'm dying of cancer. And so, with this visit, I am praying, wishing for one thing. Please, kill Peter Parker. Simultaneously, we would see Spider-Man on top of a church, where we would see him start to ring the bell, trying to get the symbiote off of him. The symbiote's voice would be omnipresent, as it would whisper in Peter's head. You are weak without me, Parker. Come, let me fully bond with you, and we will accomplish great things together. Peter would try his best to ignore the voice and would proceed in a desperate attempt to take the symbiote off. You still don't get it, do you? You are my vessel, my boy, my body, my Spider-Man. Peter would ignore the voice again and would try in a desperate attempt to ring the bell and take the symbiote off of him, which would work as we would see the symbiote start to scream. No, Peter, stop. You are nothing without me. Peter would latch onto the symbiote, taking it off his body in a similar manner as he did in Spider-Man 3. But slowly, we would see Eddie walk to the tower as he would hear strange noises, and up above he would see a mysterious figure, as well as a strange black substance making its way down towards him. Slowly, a drop would appear on his sleeve. Eddie would try to shake it off, but more of the black substance would engulf him, and his screams would be muffled by the black goo entering his mouth. Eddie would be terrified as he didn't know what was going on, and we would see Peter on top of the bell, finally free of the symbiote. And so, with limited clothing, he would swing back home, not knowing what he has just caused. We would see Eddie down below, screaming in agony. That is until the screaming would abruptly stop, and we would see him slowly start to rise his head up. The screen would fade to black.